Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am Executive Community Leader of Future of Payroll, and I do many other things, so many things that sometimes I forget what it is I do, like all the things I do. But enough about me. Welcome, Dr. Sara Hillenmeyer. I'm
There you
sorry, I
go.
mangled your last name. Hillenmeyer, correct?
You got it. Yep.
Well, welcome. Hi.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you on the podcast. And you're the Senior Director of Data Science at Payscale. And we're about to have a really interesting conversation around AI and pay equity and pay transparency. I'm sure we will recreate the magic from the green room the other day. We had a really great conversation around it. But I like to ask everybody who's a guest on the podcast, what got you into this line of work in the world of work, and in your case AI too? Like what's your passion? What gets you up and running every day?
Sure. It's a good question. I had a really pivotal pivot in my career a few years out of college. I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. And so I was working in a research lab. And at the time, the cancer research lab that I was working in and the biology field had just gotten what we called at the time big data for the first time. It was too big to fit in Excel. And they were doing these kinds of high throughput experiments that were resulting in these huge data sets. And the folks that were working in that domain at the time were Excel people, and they didn't have the computer skills to be able to handle data that didn't fit in Excel. Undergrad, I was computer science and biology, so I was like, all right, I know a little bit of stuff, like basics. And I spent a year analyzing data for these research labs. And it really just blew my mind that we could answer some of the biggest, most important questions about cancer and then other medical topics, aging, Alzheimer's, autism, with really careful data analysis and these larger data sets than we'd ever seen before. And building AI methods and analysis methods on top of that was more transformational and more impactful than the work that I could do one-on-one at the bedside if I'd been what I call a real doctor. So that shifted my trajectory, and I skipped medicine, went straight to statistics and AI, did my PhD there, and have worked in what I like to think of as important, impactful areas since then, analyzing data and trying to make the world a better place overall using these tools. And I think it's a very powerful toolkit. So I ended up in compensation for basically the same reasons. Pay is incredibly important to our society. It's incredibly important to individuals. Getting it right is really important for fairness, but also for all of the businesses in our culture. Being able to do pay well is a one of the most important levers that they have in order to achieve their business goals. So the scale of the impact and the scale of the data are the things that really drove me into compensation. And I've been in this field for several years now, and it's been a pretty warm welcome. Comp people and HR people are data people to their core, right? They've been using data for as long as data has existed, small data, big data, whatever data, to answer these questions. And so it's been a good fit for a data junkie and a methods junkie to show up and say, okay, well, maybe we can do some of this a little bit better, or maybe we can take you out of the binders full of paper and make this process easier, and use some of those fancy methods to glean as much information from the data we have as possible. So really, really great domain to be in, and certainly a domain where whether you're working with a single company or you're working with multiple companies or you're working on the data, the impact is very real, and it's real to people and to the business. So that's why I'm here, and I'm really happy to be in comp.
It's I love the way you put some of that stuff. It's true. There's so much we have such better tools, technology, capability today to analyze well, to use the old term, the big data out there to make sense of it and draw conclusions and tease out inferences and all sorts of stuff. And it helps us with our scientific advancement and all of that. I just think it's fascinating that when you saw the data, you kind of pivoted wanting from going into the medical field to going into the data field. But the sort of the impetus for it was the same, wanting to, help people to make the world a better place. And I love what you have to say about excuse me, because that is, in my opinion, you're spot on. It's really important. We need to get it right. It's in my opinion, it's ground zero for the employee experience. Excuse me,
Hmm.
and get it wrong. And I don't just mean mistakes in payroll, but get it wrong in terms of what people think they should be getting paid, right? Or uh, you're running into a retention issue as a company if you're not doing that. And so that's why I'm so glad we're talking about this today. And there's a lot of stuff that's new in the pay equity and transparency space. And I know that's what you're neck deep in every day at Payscale. And so let's talk a little bit about it. I know you recently presented at World at Work. Um, and you shared a little bit about that presentation with me last time we spoke. Maybe you could refresh my memory and share it with
Sure.
our audience for the first time here.
Yeah, yeah. So World of Work is a great conference, and I've been going for several years. This was the first year that I went where I could build my whole agenda with talks about AI. Every single time slot had at least one AI talk. So really, really active conversation. And we did a panel presentation on the last morning, first thing in the morning. It was standing room only. Like I was trying to tell people, if you already know this part, leave. Like you don't need to stand here in high heels for an hour and 15 minutes. I promise. Uh, but what we talked about then were what we thought of as next things you can try tomorrow within to use AI within the total rewards function. So we showed some demonstrations of things like here's how to write a job description using a tool like ChatGPT. Here's how to re-level some of your jobs and make sure that they're consistent using a tool like ChatGPT. Here's how to build a draft job architecture from non-normalized titles that maybe you hadn't had that before, and you need to have job titles and families and levels and a career ladder for each thing. Here's how to do that using a tool like DeepSeek or another reasoning model. And then we talked about some of the anecdotes from the field that we've heard, and my co-presenter Ben Eubanks is writing a book now on AI, or it's coming out soon on AI in HR, and he had a few really interesting examples to share from folks that he talked to as part of his research for the book about doing things like translating total reward statements and benefit statements into language that was understandable for the employee population. The company he was working with was a um, auto manufacturer and had folks that certainly didn't speak English as a first language and weren't reading at a very high grade level. And so they used tools like ChatGPT to frame the benefits and total rewards in language and analogies that really worked for the audience, and got really great feedback from folks saying, "Oh, I didn't understand this before, and now I totally get it." Um, and the talk was really well received, and part of the feedback that we've gotten, both standing right outside the door on Wednesday morning, but also as we see the feedback come in from the World at Work team, is that the first part of the conference, people were feeling some maybe FOMO or fear that this I got to get on this AI boat, but I don't know what to do. I don't. Everyone's like use AI or AI is going to take your job, and I don't know where to start. And that we gave a few examples of places where okay, I can try that tomorrow. That's low risk. I'm not sharing private information with one of these tools. A job description is not usually considered very private, and I can evaluate the output and I can understand the output and I know what's happening. So if it doesn't come out right, I can it's no skin off my back. There's low risk here if I get the job description wrong and I have to go rewrite a few places. Um, so really really interesting to see certainly year over year, just the shift in conversation and HR Tech was the same way at some of these conferences towards a whole slot, a whole schedule full of AI talks that just didn't exist. I would say 2 years ago, we were talking about other things then.
It's really interesting how it's just exploded, and just to bring it back to the pay transparency piece of it, and we'll talk about equity a little bit too. But we were talking, and there's pay transparency. Sort of the go-to or the reflexive thought is, oh yeah, this is where I have to show a range of what I'm paying for certain positions on a job description. That certainly that is a big piece of pay transparency, and there's a growing regulatory topography around that. But pay transparency is also about making the paycheck understandable,
It's true.
right?
Yeah.
And you unleash an LLM on the employee self-service large language model for folks that are getting up to speed still on AI, right? And have that communicate have
Right.
some sort of a chatbot or whatever, and have your employees able to communicate with the AI to understand what's going on with their pay. That's also part of pay transparency, and that's a big piece of it too. I want to pivot just a little bit here. There's a few questions I want to get to, that we want to get to, but one of the things here is that, can you just talk a little bit about pay equity and how AI and its ability to analyze huge data sets and make sense of that for us? How is that helping us? I'm using the royal us, right? In the
Sure.
industry,
Yeah.
right? Like understand and set forth and be more effective in exercising pay equity to make to ensure that the people who get paid for their work feel more secure in it being fair.
Yeah. Great question. When I think about pay equity, I think about two components. There's a proactive component of getting your ranges right, and I'll talk a lot about that in a transparent and defensible and equitable way. And then there's what we often think of as pay equity is very reactive of checking and making sure that everyone's paid fairly according to those ranges and according to other folks in the ranges. And I think it starts at that proactive stage of using, old as the tools evolve, using AI and large data to get really, really consistent and defensible and transparent ranges for every single job or grade, depending on how you're pricing your jobs. Um, and doing it as these tools improve and make the triangulation game better and easier, so that comp analysts and other folks who are deciding comp aren't having to look at a few different data cuts, none of which exactly match the job that they're trying to price, or a few different jobs, none of which exactly match the job that they're trying to price. And each of those analysts is saying, and with expertise, is saying, okay, well, I know that this data cut is very similar to what I'm trying to do, so I'll weight that one 80%. This other data cut adds some value, but isn't as close of a match, so I'll weight that as 20%. Mm. That that kind of understanding the nuance that goes into making those weighting decisions is takes a lot of expertise, and it varies person to person. And so even with a team of folks that are all trying to do the right thing, you're going to get 10 different answers out of those 10 different 10 different people. And that's where the opportunity for bias can creep in, not intentionally, right? Humans are very prone to unconscious bias. Recruiters are, hiring managers are. We push on those limits a little bit here and there, and you can end up with a pay strategy and a payroll basically that isn't consistent across all of the factors that you want it to be consistent on, because each of
Mhm.
those individuals has made decisions. AI and large data gives us a chance to reduce that bias at scale and to make it easier to make good decisions up front, because it doesn't require as much artistry and doesn't require understanding the nuance in these ways that can be interpreted in many, many different ways amongst many different decision makers. And so we're making progress in that area, and I mean the royal we there too, and Payscale certainly is working in this area of being able to leverage the big view of the data with sophisticated, statistically sound tools that do that triangulation in a way that is transparent and explainable, and that a comp analyst can review and say, okay, I understand now that this, if I use this technique, I'm paying 10% more for this role in New York, and 20% more for this role in New York, because the labor market in New York isn't equitable across these different jobs. And that aligns with my strategy. Or I prefer not to have that. I can make some changes here and develop a strategy across everybody that is consistent and fair. We can fix that upstream, and it's a journey. It's not you do one thing and everything's better, right? If we can continue to improve those upstream decisions and make them more consistent, and make it easier to make good data-driven, consistent decisions, then we don't have to do as much on the reactive side to double check and say, okay, are we paying in line with our values? Are we paying in line with the law? Is everything coming out fair? Because we know that the ingredients going in are designed to make that fairness happen more automatically.
Yeah, and to make it seem more fair, to have it to see that's the other piece of it is if you have these tools and we can trust them because they're looking at it more holistically and in a bigger way, a bigger picture way, then the outcome, the outputs, excuse me, are those are outputs that folks, people, humans can look at and have more confidence in it being fair, right? Because
Right.
everybody has sort of their own perception of what fair is, but if you're looking at it's almost, well, this is a neutral or unbiased or impartial tool that's doing this, and so I have more confidence in that. How can people what are some of the most accessible starting points for compensation teams looking to experiment with AI tools?
It's a good question. One thing, a quick plug, and I won't advertise too much.
Yes.
Uh, Payscale has a AI data product that we've released recently called Verse, which does some of that thinking for you. So it does some of the bias reduction for you, fills in gaps of missing data sets. If you need to price a nurse in Flat Alaska and you're opening the first clinic there and there's no other data for nurses in Flat Alaska yet because you're the first one, we can show you what the pay there would be and show you why, show you what's going into that calculation and which factors are influencing that pay. Um, so if you're a Payscale customer, you already get this, but if you're not, you can price 3 jobs for free with this tool and see if you like it, if you go to the Payscale website. So that would be a pretty accessible starting point. The other kinds of experiments I suggest folks run are, any don't use any private data. I wouldn't even use real salaries, but things that you feel comfortable that you would post on Facebook. So you can put those kinds of things into a tool like ChatGPT. Our HR BP team recently went through a leveling exercise, and we went for the folks on my team, the ICs on my team, we went from 5 to 7 levels. And my HRVP took my 5 levels, popped it into ChatGPT with the level descriptions for each of those roles, and said, "Make this into 7 levels." And what he sent me back was pretty good. It
Okay.
was about as good as I would expect him to have done on his own. He doesn't know my roles as well as I do, but it was a very, very good starting point. So that might be something to try for comp folks that are working through some of those releveling or architecture setup problems that are pretty tough and involve a lot of text.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because, and that's such a thank you for sharing those ideas because I think a lot of folks, not just in pay equity and transparency, but less narrowly for just about everything. People are thinking, where do I start with AI? And there's more to it than just okay, I'll start with Chat GPT or Claude or Gemini or something like that. Although that's certainly not a bad move, but I mean, people need guidance. They need just a little bit
Yeah.
of a signpost. Hey, go in this direction. To figure out how to get going with AI, how to start. Because what a lot of people, once they start, then they'll start digging into it and they'll realize, oh, once they get that starting point, that entry point, then they will start to see, oh, I get it, right? And then they'll start looking at other things and whatnot. It's just that first step that a lot of people need help with. Um, any parting thoughts? We're running up on the end of the
Yeah,
podcast episode, but any sort of words of wisdom for folks, or
sure.
what's coming up next?
Yeah. So certainly, as you've mentioned, I think if you're starting your AI journey, and even if you're old hat like I am, curiosity and experimentation are key right now. The tools, I tell my team this, the tools are the worst they're ever going to be, right? They just keep getting better and better, and that curve hasn't started to slow down yet. So if something doesn't work now, try it again in 6 months and see how that goes. Um, and then, as you're evaluating the tools that you use in the day-to-day, in your day-to-day workflows, looking for vendors that are pushing the envelope on the innovation and solving real problems there, your real pain points, with tools that you can understand and validate, and trust. I think is the next sort of phase of, okay, now I know kind of how all this stuff works. How do I make sure that I have the best tools I can in order to make my decisions and my work more better, and more efficient at the same time?
Wise words indeed. Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been very illuminating, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.